My practice generally is based around a perception of space, the way people perceive space based on the narratives that kind of encroach upon or embedded into man-made environments. I tend to find a place and engage with it through various methods, either via a camera or in a kind of sculptural way, but it's always a case of a kind of displacement. The work itself, the objects I create, are always a displacement of the energy I find on site. So it's really important for me to go to a place and spend time there and to engage with it. But it's done in quite a personal way, I think. Because my practice is based so much on a kind of ephemeral energy that I find in certain places, it's filtered through a kind of cinematic sphere, and it's to do with finding an aesthetic or like a photographic moment that also holds some other kind of semiotic energy. And I try and filter or refract that kind of semiotic potential into the gallery. But that's such a hard thing to do that I end up making work that kind of purposefully undermines itself. That points towards the inability of a gallery experience to really give a sense of the full narrative event that takes place in the exterior. For me, it's about a kind of there's a harmony. I don't really feel any kind of I don't feel any sense of loss when I see things change. What I'm most interested in is the transformation of an environment, is the moment at which it seems to be that it feels as though you can be moving directly through a space that's changing around you. It's an idea of a kind of the city as like a sequence, like a sequential series of thresholds, and those thresholds kind of rise and fall around you as you move through them. And that's where that kind of conflict comes in, and that's why the work may appear at times aggressive, and at the same time I feel like it has quite a specific social dialogue. I like a city to be mobile, I like a space to maintain mobility, but it's so often an aggressive act that you end up with very, very harsh events rubbing up to one another.
So I've found found a way of working that removes myself from typical studio practice, and almost like finds a workshop wherever I go. This almost like hunter-gatherer way of working that is like a bottom-up way of articulating certain social events and I guess like the monotony of lives and classic systems. And so these articulations are infiltrations and like reductions of huge systems to their simplest finesse. The project itself is less a material experiment and less a material study or a new way of working, more a speculative insight into social strata and these like systems, these very established systems that are transferable across the whole country and probably across the whole of the world. In creating these objects, these like totemic like manifestations of a system and of a set of people and of opinions, although the opinions in the things themselves have to maintain very loose. In these like totemic representations, they are almost a way of like forging placelessness out of like, I guess like newspaper articles or bits of documentary or like things that people talk about on social media, and in removing these objects and these materials and processing the materials into these objects, there are these like few like divisions of material then being extrapolated and put somewhere else and displayed. In doing that, I hope that the tension and the like real narrative can be like upheld and also discussed.
For the last like 4 years, my work has been looking at this kind of subject matter, this idea of how we construct and represent history in the present, and how those representations tell us more about the present than they do in a way about the past. So just before that project, working with film props, I had looked at the idea of the film set and the physical remains of that cinematic production process. So how these representations of history that are left behind in a landscape themselves become historical sites. And so moving on from that, then when I came to do the MA, looking at the film prop was a way for me to continue that research and that kind of interest in the production of history. And yeah, for me, the film prop is a kind of has a duality in its role as an object and in its history. So on the one hand, you have this represented history, which is that of ancient Greece or Rome or Egypt, and then it has its own history as an object. So it gets bought, sold, hired, reused multiple times in fictional films and sometimes even in documentaries. And for me, it was about taking these very marginal, minor elements of the cinematic process and bringing them to light, elevating them to the same status as a historical object. I see them as objects that can reveal just as much, or if not more, about history than a real artifact. And maybe that's a really bold statement, but I think there is a lot to be learned from these small kind of forgotten objects. At a certain point, I became really interested in the kind of social side of these histories, or what impact they have on people. I'd done this residency in Russia, and I met these Lenin impersonators that work in the kind of tourist industry there in Red Square. And when I visited the first time, I just got in a conversation with them, and it was incredibly interesting, the kind of dynamic relationship between the other impersonators. And again, like the prop, there was multiple impersonators of the same historical characters. So in this case, I was looking particularly at the Soviet historical figures like Lenin and Stalin. And so then I went back to Russia then this Easter to make that film. But going out there kind of blindly, I'd done a lot of research, but I wasn't sure of what was going to come out of it. But I knew I wanted it to have it as an interview format, because these impersonators operate in the same way, in a similar way, I guess, to the film prop, that these kind of living representations that are obviously are never going to be an accurate representation, and that's never the goal either with them. And obviously it's influenced by their own personal interests. It's a tourist's business as well. So all these factors made a really kind of incredibly rich subject matter there, and that wasn't such a huge step away from my work with the prop. It was still engaging with how history repeats itself and how these histories re-manifest themselves in the present.
In my practice, I would say that I'm interested in the way we receive the image and the way, basically I would say the social, the cultural and the institutional lives of what I call aesthetic things, and things here being, they may be images, they may be texts, or they may be moving images. I'm interested in how these various aesthetic things are capable of circulating within different kinds of regimes of reception, of production, of circulation. And yeah, I'm basically interested in how all these things are actually mediated as we are receiving them. may it be by language, by memory, or by culture. I think a lot of my practice is an attempt to make sense of of the things I encounter in my life, as an artist. Whether it be something that I'm reading, a film that I'm watching, or various anecdotes that I hear. And in a way, I'm very curious and very interested in how, as a spectator, as an artist, I'm also a spectator, and how these various phenomena come to be received. And one of the things I'm particularly interested in is the way language plays a role in terms of how language almost has a certain tactile or almost a morphological quality to it, such that it is capable of shaping the image or the things that we see, such that language is not purely descriptive, but is something that almost takes on a certain life of its own. Yeah. One of the key terms that the Nine Plus project uses to describe our generation is the digital native, and I've been always thinking about, and in a way it's entirely accurate because we are in a way people who have lived through the digital age, but at the same time I would like to think about the digital also beyond that of digital technology, because the word digital is an adjective for digit, and the digit essentially refers to the finger, and I kind of think about us as digital natives as beings who are no longer using the hand as a key tool for creation, but rather the finger. And if you think about the hand, the hand is that which is capable of grasping things. It is capable of holding tools. Whereas the finger is more like an instrument for curation, for directing, for kind of regulating flows and directionalities. So I think there's an interesting change in terms of how we create art and how we process information these days, such that our key instrument is not really so much a tool, a tool that we hold in our hand, but it's rather more like an interface that you kind of manipulate with your fingers, that you kind of mold and kind of stretch and test. So I think this is an interesting mode of creation, and a mode of creation that is, I would say, rather curatorial in its manner.